Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan. I don't think anybody out there wants to live in squalor. There are many people that believe that cleaning every single day is therapeutic. I can see how it would be. I'm not one of those people. But there are some people that like to push a vacuum cleaner every single day. Some people go through countless numbers of cans of furniture polish. They like that fresh lemony smell, right? There are others that like to clean their windows. Nothing wrong with that, particularly if it helps you make it through life. But I want you to think about something. Can you imagine being made to clean a particular area? And we're not talking as a child, your parents admonishing you because of a dirty bedroom or dishes they haven't been able to put their hands on in months and months. No, we're talking about something totally different. What if there were an instance where one's lover had killed someone in their home, maybe even taken a knife to the body, and they look at that other person, their significant other, and says, clean this up. Today on Body Bags, we're going to talk about one such case and a big mess that was left behind regarding a homicide that came along with dismemberment. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. I'm not saying that Kimmy and I are the neatest people in the world, Dave.
Okay.
However, I'm want to leave a coffee cup here or there, shoes, thrown about. I'm always in a hurry. I mean, you see me, I kind of spin in like a tornado and then spin back out. And I don't know. I think I'm at a point in time where I'm just, you just get to a point where you're just so dog tired at the end of the day. It's like, I'll get to it tomorrow. But Dave, when you've got cases that involve really intense violence, I think that most people that are involved in such things have an awareness that I don't need to leave any other kind of evidence around that's visible. Certainly to the unaided eye. They even know that you got to clean up blood. You've got to clean up any kind of mess that may have been created in, say, a scuffle. And that's a case that we have today.
Dude, if you think it's therapeutic to clean, come to my house, okay? You talking about leaving. Here's what's really bad. Imagine this, Joe, just a brief snippet into my life. I 4 kids and all their friends, my wife and I, and dogs. We adopt dogs, right? So we always had a house full of activity, and there was always something laying around. Well, somebody else is going to pick that up before I get home, right? Yeah. Well, now it's just me.
Yeah.
So when I look at the mess, dude, I created it, and I'm the only one that's going to pick it up. I can't even blame the dogs. Yeah. So you go ahead and keep leaving your coffee cup sitting around.
You're sole proprietor? Is that what you're saying?
That I am just me and this house and electronics. That's it. All right, but here's the deal. In this case, you have a dad. Every dad knows at some point in time you're going to get a call from one of your children, and you're going to have to relay messages to somebody. Oftentimes, it's to another parent because somebody has messed up. And in this case, Selena Blanco's dad has to call the cops. And he calls them. Jeffrey Malacca calls the police to say, okay, guys, I'm not really sure what has happened, but my daughter says a criminal friend killed her boyfriend. And that's where the story starts, Joe, with a dad getting a call from his daughter and him having to relay this information to police. And you mentioned a fight, right? There was an altercation. Well, this is a case that I'm really curious because we've dealt with so many different things. My goodness, Joe. We did an entire episode at CrimeCon about dismemberment, for crying out loud.
Yes.
We could do this one because in this case, we've got everything you could possibly imagine. We don't even know the truth yet because this is a brand new case. It is still being adjudicated. There has not been the guy's just arrested, okay? We have not even had a trial. Everything is alleged. I want to be very careful about that. But the allegation is that a couple was having an argument about the rent. And the victim calls his buddy for some reason to come over and help him get the girlfriend to agree to pay the rent. I'm not sure. This is one of those crazy stories that when it finally gets to court, we'll know more. But bottom line, that's where it started. A couple having a couple of drinks, probably invite a friend over into their argument, and an argument becomes physical. Now, Joe, if you were in the presence of a friend of yours and he and his spouse got into an argument that turned physical, what would you do?
I guess it depends on how it's defined as physical.
They're hitting each other.
Yeah, well, I'm going to have to interdict that situation. Okay. And I think that any man certainly that's there and that is seeing another man perhaps put hands on a woman, it should be interdicted at that point in time. But the problem is that crazy has always been around, Dave, as we know. But I submit to you, you and I have had this discussion many times off camera, where evil seems to escalate and has been escalating, it would seem. And not that there hasn't always been evil. It's just that it seems as though the level of violence many times has increased. And I think that this is evidenced, from my perspective at least, upon by viewing the violence that is exacted upon the bodies of the dead. Not just the bodies of the living, when someone is attacked, but how the dead are treated. No. And in this case, I think that's evidence. Let me give you one more little slice of reality here. I don't know if this is evidence of anything. However, the accused in this particular case, Dave, we hear about a lot of cases that are non-adjudicated that we might speak about, either on body bags or other platforms that we're with. But I'm always curious about a number that is put up. If somebody has been hooked up on charges and the judge says, you have to have this much money to get out of jail, Dave, they must feel pretty strongly about this case, because this guy, what's his number again? Can you give it to me again so all of our friends can hear it?
Christopher Ebanks is the guy's name, not Joseph Ebank, Christopher Ebank. And I guess the judge thinks Ebank means $1 million. $1 million bond. But Joe, this is not his first rodeo. Christopher Ebanks is a convicted felon. A convicted felon who was on probation, had just been let out of prison 1 month earlier. In his first month of a new life, he finds himself going back to court. But you know what he did, Joe? Gets that $1 million bond. And he appears before the judge. And he says, Ebanks says to the judge, can't we lower that to, I don't know, $500,000? I don't think I can come up with $1 million, but $500,000, I think I might be able to do it. The judge said, I think I'm good with $1 million. I think I'm good.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, let's just play a little ping pong here just for a second. In your opinion, do you think that just the evidence alone in this case is rather egregious? Yeah. If he had not just recently been let out of prison, do you think that if he had allegedly perpetrated the same crime, that bond would have been set at the same amount?
Right. I think, Joe, I think you're dead on right, because when we get into the nuts and bolts of what transpired, the judge has to take all things into consideration. That what is alleged here. It's not that there was an accident in the skateboard park with friends out there singing Kumbaya and tripped over a thing and, fell and, oh my gosh, I accidentally hit him in the head with a brick. It's not like that. Yeah. This is 1 month out of prison.
Yeah.
And you are accused of beating a friend and stabbing him with an axe type of weapon. And they say axe
Yeah.
type because the way the wounds were mentioned, they were kind of like a cross of some type, like an X or something jabbing
Yeah,
with.
they had mentioned. Triangular.
Yeah.
I'm going to be fascinated to see the evidence in this case. Let me give you a little bit of history here.
I knew you would. You know what? When I saw
Yeah,
this, I was like, okay. I remember you telling me about like in the medieval times where they would have like a piece of lead at the end of a stick that goes back and forth that has claws on it, and they bop you in the head with it and take your brain out. You know?
well, that's actually, I think, Richard. Wait, hang on, Richard the
Yeah,
Third. I
it
think
was.
that's how he was killed. They believe there was this triangular shaped blade. I say it's not really well, I guess it has edges, but it's triangular shaped if you look down the long axis of it. And it was meant to penetrate armor. And you would hold it, and they believe that he had this kind of injury. His skeleton kind of revealed this, where you could hold it over a victim that's down before you, and you take it and you jam it through, their helmet or their armor or anything.
Mm.
But here's a more modern context. Did you know that years and years ago, they outlawed triangular shaped bayonets? There were bayonets that had three, it was like if you pressed it into something, it kind of had a three-pointed star appearance to it. And the reason that they did that is that those particular types of insults were so catastrophic that surgeons could not close them up because of the nature of the three edges. So if you think about a fixed bayonet, and we're not talking about like Civil War, we're talking about going into like World War One, that era. And so this could be driven through armor and things that might impede. They used to wear these kind of leather heavy flak,
Right.
kind of like flak vest. It could penetrate through there, and if that were the case, then it was an unrecoverable injury.
Sure.
And so those were outlawed. And I'm finding it very interesting. They're saying axe like yet triangular
Right.
shape.
That's what I couldn't get to. I'm sitting here going, I can't wait for Joe to explain this one, because right now I'm in my head, Joe. I'm thinking, okay, how does the meeting begin? Where you're saying, okay, we got your regular bayonet. That when you're in hand-to-hand combat in war, where this other person is going to kill you if you don't kill them first, but this one jabbing item is just it's too gross. It just we want you to kill each other, but this is just too much mayhem. Really? So if I stick this into your heart, that's okay. But this one is not? How does that meeting even take place?
Well, there's
Where's the
a big No, in the military, there's a big philosophical debate that's gone on for years and years, and people may have heard this before. That you think about people shooting to kill. Many people, I don't necessarily hold to it, but many people believe that it's better to wound the enemy. For every one wounded, it takes two people or at least one other person to get them off the battlefield. Right. And that's always kind of this underlying principle. Now, I don't know that was necessarily the case with that, but I'm very curious in our case here out of Arizona. I'm really wondering if, in fact, this subject had access to something like this. Because I can tell you, you'd mentioned just a moment ago that when walking down the sidewalk, he can't just merely say, well, my friend tripped and conked his head and died. Not only can you not say that in this case, you can't say, well, my friend walked down the sidewalk and his head accidentally fell off either, because this gentleman was in fact missing his noggin. We talk a lot about interpreting trauma on body bags, Dave, and I think that in this particular case, there's going to be a lot of trauma to go through. Sure. And not to mention, we know that we have a witness to the trauma as well. And that's going to be quite compelling, I think, coupled with the story that the forensic pathologist is going to tell when they do eventually get onto the stand in this case. Because they can talk about, every single impact. Mm-hmm. We're talking about a beating case here. And so every single impact interpretively, I think for our, you know how I said that in the past, I think we did a recent episode as well, where I said it's almost impossible for us to sequence
Oh yeah,
injuries.
yeah.
That's important here because this is one of those cases. I'm not saying that it is going to be a fact. However, if you have an eyewitness to an attack and you've got injuries or insults to a person's face and their head and their neck and all these other areas, maybe their chest, if you have an eyewitness to that event, you might not can say, absent, firsthand witness accounts, I can tell you the sequence. In this particular case, we very well might can, Dave.
It's interesting that we kind of come to this from a really weird standpoint in that we have the story of what took place, according to the eyewitness, before we even had the body,
Right.
And you mentioned cleaning up. So let's just start with, I told you it was a fight, and it ended up between guys that are supposedly friends. Now, I don't know about the friends. I don't know that. I just know that that's how it is presented. We'll find out later. But, I mentioned that Christopher Ebanks, he's 32 years old, Joe, and he just got out of prison a month earlier, a month before this happened. The victim's name is Billy Joe Carrethers. Billy Joe is 44. Now, according to our eyewitness, or actually it's whoever tells the story last, but no matter what happened, the three of them were drinking together. The witness, Billy Joe, and Mr. Ebanks. And that's when the couple, the victim and his girlfriend, got into an argument. And according to, I guess right now, the witness, the violence began when this argument about rent money became physical, when the victim, Billy Joe Carruthers, physically attacked his girlfriend, hit his girlfriend. I don't know. I don't want to say that. It's just that's what's being alleged in some reporting of this. What happened after that is that, according to this eyewitness, that's when Billy Joe and Christopher Ebanks got into a battle. Christopher Ebanks faced off with him and said, "Hey, you want to fight a man? Fight a man. Come on, fight me."
Yeah.
And that's what began the fight. But during this fight, Billy Joe Carruthers was fighting hands, maybe. He's throwing hands, but Christopher Ebank has some type of weapon. I'm guessing, it's been called an axe of some type with, I think you mentioned that.
Hatchet.
Yeah, I don't know where you get the triangle in. I'm thinking, okay, well, here's the something, Joe. The guy's been in prison. Maybe once he got home, he had some time on his hands, and he's making his own, instead of prison shank, he's got his apartment shank. He's making his own weapon in his apartment, and he wants to do the most damage he can, and he knows this is what will do it, so he made his own type of a weapon. That's all I can think of, because they don't sell them.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point that you bring up, because if he is a felon, and we know that he is, that's confirmed. He's just got out of prison. Remember the bond that we talked about, $1 million, right? And he could come up with 500,000. Wow, that's interesting. What if he had created, because, if you're a felon and you're in possession of a firearm, and coming out of a prison environment, and that is a world that most people cannot identify with, and depending upon the level of security that you're in, the people that you're housed with, all these sorts of things, you have to think about your personal safety all the time. And I think that this is a genius idea that you've come up with. Did he fashion a weapon, perhaps of his own making, that he could have at his fingertips? And if somebody came by the house to check on him, or whether the case, I'm not in possession of a firearm, man. Right. I don't have one. I'm not going back. I'm not going back to the joint over this. Yeah, I've got a hatchet. There's nothing wrong with having a hatchet. What if he developed a weapon that not only had an end of it that was like an axe, or saying hatchet, and it also had another end that could perhaps be a penetrative tool, which, by the way, shanks, shivs, whatever you want to call it, they're shanks and you get shivved with a shank, or is it you have a shiv and you get shanked with a shiv? I don't know, but those two terms are many times used interchangeably. And if this is something that was fashioned and attached, it's going to give this interesting injury, which is fascinating to me, because I've seen injuries, Dave, You know what is a very fascinating injury to see is actually to see someone that has been stabbed with a Phillips screwdriver, Phillips head screwdriver. And there are other, when you have these multiple tiny little blades, okay, you don't appreciate it as much like if it goes into the soft tissue of the chest and to the abdomen where it collapses. But let's just say you have it over the sternum. You can see where people have used, and I've seen it, foreheads, the tops of heads, jaws, where they've been stabbed with a Phillips head, and it leaves these little starred patterns behind.
Wow.
Okay. And you'll see it impressed on the bone beneath it too. It doesn't look like a bladed tip, like a standard, what's called a regular head screwdriver. Okay. We're talking about pattern injuries now. I'm fascinated by the fact that they're talking about this because I've got to know more, friends. I don't know about you guys. I got to know more about this weapon. And you're stabbed over and over again. You'll see these little patterns begin to develop. And according to what we're hearing, this hatchet may have had multiple utility. It's not just a stabbing weapon, but it's used for something else as well.
All right. Enough of the beating is going on that Ebanks allegedly kills Carrethers.
Yeah.
Now, there's blood. And, we've talked about what happens after somebody's dead, what happens. Well, they took the body, they being Ebanks, and now we believe that based on what we're being told, the girlfriend, Selena, helped take her boyfriend, Carrethers, into the bathroom and put his body in the bathtub. Now, when the body is in the bathtub, he's dead. Remember this. This is an hour or so earlier. We're having a couple of drinks and having fun. Got into an argument about rent. Now, you're putting your boyfriend, who you live with, in the bathtub dead, blood everywhere. And Christopher Ebanks, the convicted felon, out of jail, just celebrating his 1 month out of prison by killing a man, allegedly. Got to clean it up, Joe. Got to clean up. And he makes Selena, he makes her clean up, demands that she clean up this mess. How big of a mess is it going to be, Joe? A man that dies of these unique weapon injuries, being stabbed in the chest, and I'm guessing the chest. I'm kind of focused just on that area.
I think, brother, that these injuries are going to be wide ranging.
Oh, wow.
That's what I think, because and I've got indication of that, and I'm going to give a reveal here in just a second. But I think, first off, I think that you can see that this is a disordered case in the way that the cleanup was handled. But let's go back to the injuries just for a second. Because we know beating,
right?
We know hatchet is involved, and we also know that this 3-bladed weapon, for whatever the utility of the thing was initially, was used in this particular case. So, in life, as we're attacked, let's just say that he was initially struck in the face. Well, where are we going to have blood issued from in the beginning? Well, the first two places. You're struck in the head, and I'm just talking about with a closed fist, nose and mouth. All right. So, my comments about the Guthrie case, where I'm talking about blood deposition outside the door.
Right.
So you're going to see passive fall will be these big droplets that are deposited all over the place. If it's in the nasopharynx area, which with what was left behind, there is expirate. And let's clear this up, because all our friends on body bags know this. So let's say it again. There's a difference between aspirate. We're aspirating something, right? Okay. Aspiration, pneumonia, these sorts of things. And then we have expirate. Okay. Coming out of the nose and the mouth. When you see Guthrie's blood deposition there, and they say that it is her blood, you get these tiny little satellites that are all over the place. And some of the big droplets also look like they're aerated, which means they've got these tiny little bubbles in the bigger droplets. I think it had oxygen in it, or air at least.
Let
me
ask you something about that, Joe, because I'm wondering, when I'm watching reports on different crimes, and I see somebody trying to share an expert opinion, and they're wrong, and I know they're wrong because I know that's not what, I know that what the blood looks like from all the different ways that it comes out of a person's body. When you're watching some of the reporters that are just so off, that the experts are so off, Do you want to pick up the phone and call somebody? What do you do? Does it get, because I want to throw something at the TV half the time. I get really frustrated when people say something that's just totally wrong.
It's very frustrating because, if you don't get it right, and look, I've been wrong.
Yeah.
I'm not, I'm chief amongst sinners. I will get things wrong. However, you try to go back and self-correct. Just going back even a step further, you start talking about Charlie Kirk case. There were several individuals, I'll say that without saying their name, that were referring to the coroner in Utah. Utah hasn't had a coroner in over 100 years. And they were saying the coroner was this and coroner was that. Get your facts straight, because there's a huge gulf of difference between a coroner and a medical examiner. And by the way, in case you didn't know, Utah has a state medical examiner. They don't have elected county coroners. So get your facts straight before you start talking out of school.
That's kind of what I was after, Joe, because I know that. Yeah. And I wondered, I actually heard somebody describing the blood at the Guthrie place, and I knew what they were saying was wrong. And they are actually somebody of merit that I see on they're just making something up about what they saw. And in this case, what we're dealing with here in Arizona, where Ebanks has allegedly, stabbed this man to death and then used the hatchet for another way, which we'll get to in just a second. Yeah. But you're going to find that blood all over. Is that blood going to be indicative of when that, is blood going to come out of a wound differently, the first or two stabs versus the last stab? Or is it all going to be the same?
It all depends on the target area, anatomical location of the injury itself. Let's just say that you hit somewhere that is less vascular, say for instance, than another location. Maybe if someone is stabbed in the shoulder, all right, there's a gulf of difference between this insult and an insult to the throat, okay? So that deposition, unless you clip an artery, and we've all heard about arterial spray, and that's a real thing, and it kind of, when you see that deposition of the blood, you see it kind of pumping out, and you'll see it kind of, and with the movement in the individual, if it wasn't so ghastly, it would be truly scientifically fascinating from the perspective of how the human body is made, how it works, right? So you can actually track movement, not just of the blood, but also the victim spatially as they're moving, say, across a big white wall, and you've got blood that's being cast. Whereas if you stab a less than vascular area, you're always going to hit some kind of vessel, because we've got capillary beds, all right? Arterioles and venules. We learned that when we were back in the 8th grade. You're always going to have some blood that is coming out of the body. It's just going to have a different velocity to it, all right? Some might not have any velocity at all. That's why, going back to Guthrie, if you have a bloody nose, that you can have a bloody nose that is producing profusely, but it's not going to be the same as like a sneeze or like a cough to clear, or certainly like a gunshot wound where you have literally high velocity blood deposition. And so depending upon the injury that you have, it's going to look completely different. I mean, how many times, friends out there, have you ever seen, or maybe you yourself have experienced this, where you've gotten a cut on your face, certainly in your scalp? Down here in the South, we say, boy, you better settle down. You're going to bust your head wide open. Well, there's a reason they say that, because you're going to get like this big open laceration, and the volume of blood that comes out, because the head is so vascular, you'll get this profuse amount of blood, but it's not necessarily spurting. It's just kind of pouring. So that deposition is going to look different, right? And so you have to have a real keen eye for this sort of thing. And I think that blood will be a part of this. But as they begin to tell this tale, the injuries are also going to be a big part of it. Both those that occurred in life and those that occurred in death. I hate flies. The reason I hate flies is that they're filthy. They light on things. They light on you. And I take great pleasure. I don't know. Maybe I do have a touch of the sadist in me. I love fly paper. And I like those little sticky tapes that you can hang outside, and you'll see them all adhere to the thing, and they can't move and get away. Their little legs are stuck. They just die there. I've often thought of individuals that find themselves in situations like this where they have committed a homicide, allegedly, and now they're trying to figure out what to do. Kind of like the fly stuck in the on the fly paper. What are you going to do, man? You've got all six, I don't know, of your legs, stuck to the fly paper. Maybe even your wing gets stuck. You might even tear your wing away, and you're panicked, right? You're panicked. And that goes to the mindset many times of people that are trying to free themselves up for the horror that they themselves have created.
Oh, yeah.
And many times, Brother Dave, they create more of a mess if, than need be.
Well,
and I think that might be the case here.
Joe, when the police say the first thing they smell when they walk in the door is bleach, and cleaning.
Yeah.
Yeah, what was going on. And in this case, according to the victim's girlfriend, all right, remember, Christopher Ebanks has allegedly killed this man. The body is now in the bathtub. And Christopher Ebanks tells the man's girlfriend, clean it up now. They get all the cleaning stuff. He's making her clean it up. It's not even saying that he's cleaning up, Joe. Ebanks is not apparently helping clean up. He's directing cleaning it up, telling her to clean up the mess. Getting blood up off the floor or wherever it is, walls, cabinets, I don't know. I mean, getting all that up is one thing. But they still have a body in the bathtub, Joe, and got to do something with it. So Christopher Ebanks has a plan, apparently. And that plan includes an inflatable mattress, a cord, and I want to get this right, okay? The victim was wrapped in carpeting, an air mattress, and was bound with a white extension cord and additional items. Now, I'm wondering, was there a lamp, blow dryer plugged into the extension cord, Joe, and they just kept wrapping around this thing? I don't know. We'll find out.
I don't know. Well, you remember I mentioned the frenzied disordered attack, right? This is not like a precision surgical thing, like I'm going to wait in the dark and the guy, comes walking up the stairway and I'm going to pop him with a suppressed weapon, right? And then just disappear into the darkness. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a spur of the moment frenzied attack that could involve hands, a hatchet, a 3-bladed object. I don't know. Little green men from Mars. I have no idea. You've got all of these elements that are, and so, that kind of odd gumbo of components that you just talked about, how many things do you need? Because if you're talking about an air mattress, a piece of carpet, you're using an extension cord. This is not something that, and how many times, what was the guy, I can't remember the guy's name that got rid of his wife. I don't know if they've ever been able to find her body. Was it in Connecticut? And they've got him coming to Home Depot and they've got him on camera and he's purchasing. I know our friends will.
Oh, yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yeah, he's, oh, God. And
yeah, didn't he take his own life, I think, at some point.
Well, now we might be talking about different ones. You might, we'll have to, you know what? Let's come back to that in a minute because we still got this guy. We've got a body in the tub wrapped in all that stuff. But Joe, he's missing a couple of things too, because Christopher Ebanks went in there, and all I'm thinking, Joe, if he doesn't have a head and he doesn't have hands, the body can't be identified. Does that sound like prison logic? A prison lawyer came up with that? Somebody who's been in the clink for 35, 40 years?
Yeah, well, it probably does. There's been this new thing in the last few decades called DNA. Yeah. And so, the adage of the old adage of, if I get rid of the hands and I get rid of the head, I'm doing away with, with dental, I'm doing away with fingerprints, all this sort of thing. Now, you're leaving the biggest component here, because we can harvest DNA from just about any, particularly with the fresh dead. And this guy's fresh dead. Yeah. Okay, this is not something that, what is it? Old John Brown lay a moldering in his grave. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a guy that's fresh dead, that is, these samples could be easily harvested. But one of the problems, back to the bathtub, and I'm thinking about the hatchet, a big reveal here. He's missing a head, right? He's missing his hands. And if you've got, let's say you've got a bathtub. Okay. Now, what kind of bathtub is it? Is it ceramic tile? Is it one of those old porcelain tubs? Or is it one of these cheapo plastic insert things? Well, I'm just thinking if you're in the tub and you're doing this, any of those three choices, if you're wielding a hatchet in that, you're going to ding up the surface. Okay. This is not something you're going to leave. Not only are you going to leave marks on the bone, you're going to leave marks on the underlying surface. So whatever the instrument that you're using can be married up, not just to, from a tool mark perspective, on the edges, the leading edges of the bone where the appendage is missing. You could take a section of that tub or the wall or whatever it is. If it's left a mark there and you've got what's called a questioned bit of evidence, which would be that hatchet, or it could be a saw, you can marry that up. You can marry that up through tool mark examination. The other thing that you're going to leave behind, and I've actually participated in this after someone has bled in a bathtub through dismemberment, is drain traps. And so the idea is you pull the whole tub out, that S-trap that's underneath there, you pull that sucker out and you generate a lot of cast off material, not just the blood. You'll find it in there, and that can be typed as well, Dave.
Wow. So you've got so many ways to get caught.
Yeah.
But apparently, allegedly, chop off the head, chop off the hands, and let's get this body wrapped in the carpet and the air mattress, and let's put him someplace else. So they take him out of the bathtub and shove the body in a closet without his head and hands. The head and the hands have been placed inside the bathroom in a suitcase. A suitcase, Joe. And you know what he did? Christopher Ebanks allegedly left with the suitcase and threatened the girl to get in the car and go to his place because she's going to get herself cleaned up now to get rid of that evidence. So in his car, they drive from the apartment where the killing has allegedly happened. Now they're traveling to Christopher Ebanks' apartment to make this victim's girlfriend wash herself. And it's at knife point or gun point, not sure, but he's holding a weapon on her and threatening her with death if she doesn't do it. So he's already made her clean up all the blood, clean up all the mess where I killed your boyfriend. Now you're going to clean yourself.
And, we see that happen many times with sexual assault perpetrators with female victims.
Oh, yeah.
They'll hang around. They'll make the victims take a shower and demonstrate, that they are cleaning themselves, and then collect all of that as said evidence and go and try to deposit. There's just an innumerable amount of those cases that are out there that has that kind of because the one tieback, the one anchor point in all of this is that it's all associated with violence, that you're compelling somebody to do this. And look, I'm not sitting in judgment of this woman.
No.
If I had borne witness to what she saw and that I've got somebody holding a weapon on me, I'm not saying I wouldn't, I would not be compliant. I mean, all of us can say that we wouldn't comply, that we wouldn't do it. Really? How do you know?
Police.
How do you know what, because you see certain levels of horror and you're traumatized where you're almost catatonic, man.
Exactly. And the police have been very clear on this show. She is not a suspect in this. She's a victim. She was kidnapped. And by the way, Christopher Ebanks is charged with kidnapping because of what he did to her after the fact. Now, remember how I told you we started with, it was this girl's dad that called the police, right? Because she got away from Christopher Ebanks and calls dad, tells him what has just happened. He doesn't know. Is she tripping? What's really going on?
Yeah.
I mean,
right.
I'd have trouble believing that, Joe. I would. But he calls police and explain, and then police go to the apartment, and sure enough, they find Mr. Carrethers in the closet, okay? Wrapped up in the carpet, in the air mattress. It takes them a day to locate Christopher Ebanks. He's only been out of prison for a month. He's not really dug in yet into the community. They do find his apartment. They make entry, and they find the suitcase, Joe, described by the victim's girlfriend. When they open the suitcase, there you have the victim's head and hands.
What possible explanation can you offer up from that? Do you say, I was just walking down the street and I found
Yeah.
these? I found the suitcase. Oh, I had a suitcase that was empty and I happened to find these. I collected them. I'm just going to bring them to you.
I was bringing them to you guys. Hey, that you're saving me the trip, saving me the gas money. Thank you.
Well, I was thinking, what in the world are you going to do? What was the plan? What was the plan with all that remained of this gentleman? That area out in Phoenix, it doesn't have much water, but it's surrounded by a sea of sand and wilderness and desert. It doesn't take too far to drive out of town and you're in the middle of nowhere. Was his plan to try to go out and deposit these? Why? What would be the motivation for destroying a man's body like this? Whereas if you had kept it intact, if you had handled it yourself, maybe you might have had a better chance of getting away with it. But for every punch he threw, every puncture wound he created, every swing of the hatchet, and every bit of his body that he chopped up, he left behind more and more evidence. Now, he's only alleged to have committed this crime. He has not been tried, and he's certainly not been convicted. But let's see where the science leads in this particular case. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bag.